My name is Ronan O'Malley. I'm the Director of Programs for the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston. We would like to extend a special welcome to members joining from different World Affairs Councils around the country. This event is part of C by C Amplified, which is an ideas summit presented by World Affairs Councils nationwide and organized by the World Affairs Councils of America. This week, councils from around the United States are working together to highlight the power of our network. We encourage every one of you joining us today to support your local World Affairs Council. Before we begin our conversation today on our future in space, developments, commercialization, and governance, I'd also like to invite you to join us for another live Zoom webinar tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central for a discussion on Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, revolutionary lives and enduring legacies for the U.S. and the world, with Dr. Peniel Joseph from the University of Texas. And please also note that all of our live Zoom webinars are added to the World Affairs Council of Houston's YouTube channel shortly after the conclusion of all our live events. And please feel free to subscribe to our channel. Lastly, to present a question for today's event, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Today, we are delighted and honored to be joined by Evelyn Miralles. Evelyn is a former Chief Principal Engineer at NASA Johnson Space Center Houston and an icon for female pioneers in the STEM field. Her work at the Virtual Reality Laboratory at NASA furthered human spaceflight by training United States astronauts to perform spacewalks and working outside of an spacecraft in microgravity. Miralles is currently an Associate Vice President for Strategic Information Initiatives and Technology at the University of Houston Clear Lake. Will you please join me in welcoming the Council's Basma Guri and Evelyn Miralles to the Council.
Thank you, Ronan. And Evelyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Good evening to those of you tuning in. It's my pleasure to be moderating our discussion tonight. Evelyn, there is so much to explore within our developments in the space industry. I want to start off by asking about current NASA missions and what are key goals it hopes to accomplish in the next 10 years.
Again, thank you for the invitation to be here with you for this webinar. NASA has always been involved in many important missions. The probably three ones that I'm going to mention will be that are very important, that are going to be very meaningful, impactful in the next years to come. Will be the commercialization of space, the Demo 2 mission. From SpaceX. It's going to be taking off soon by the end of May, and it's going to be the first time that we're going to be launching from Florida, from the USA, after we ended the space shuttle program in 2012. That's a very memorable mission that is going to basically begin the commercialization of space, if you will. Taking astronauts, NASA astronauts, in a commercial vehicle. So the next mission that I can point to you will be the moon mission, Artemis mission, which is going to be to take it basically aligns the launching of astronauts to settle at the moon. And that's going to be in about in the 2024 year, 2024. And it's going to be extremely impactful for humanity, actually, to be there, back to the moon and to settle it, to be and on the surface of the moon. There are other missions that are going to be coming with that, which is like, for example, the Gateway mission, which is basically another program that will create a space station that is going to orbit the moon. Then now going into the moon is going to open definitely the next mission, which is the long mission for NASA, which is going to Mars. And going into the moon will allow us to have the first step into going beyond. There is a lot of things that we need to learn. So in the next 5, 10 years, 15 years, we're going to be learning how to get to that deep space Going to Mars is not going to be easy, but that's obviously the long mission, and it's going to probably be done. They set it up for about 2025, 2030. So we're talking at some time from now, but going into the moon is definitely going to open and create all those technologies and overcome a lot of challenges that we're going to use in order to go to Mars. So those are probably the most uh, uh, impactful, I think, missions that I can think of at the moment that is happening. But there's many missions that NASA is always
Right, of course. And that all sounds very exciting. Evelyn, you are well known as a pioneer of using virtual reality systems to train astronauts for spacewalks. Could you talk about your program as well as other programs NASA is currently developing to further human spaceflight?
Well, when that's obviously incredible time, because when I started working at NASA in 1992, the first what is it project that I have actually for was to create a simulation to live on the moon surface.
Mhm.
And immediately we have to change that and start looking into how can we effectively train astronauts for spacewalks and robotics operation. That's how this project that I worked for many years was basically pioneering developing virtuality in order to train astronauts for this very unique environment, which is space, and how to do in a spacewalk and follow a procedure and all these specific components that they need to learn about so quickly and so precisely. So um, that was a program that basically took many years to develop, and virtual reality wasn't known as much at only in the military area to
Mhm.
train with. It wasn't a tool that was very easily accessible. It was probably it was very expensive in terms of the helmets. So that was an incredible project, and it took many years, and it transitioned on what we know now, that we all know, the VR and the augmented realities too. So all these came into fruition through NASA, through the NASA programs. And there are many programs that NASA are working on that directly impact human exploration. One of them related to what I was doing, it was thinking of how can we augment an astronaut. And in that sense is how can we augment an astronaut to give that person enough information for them to do do activities very far away from Earth on their own, by themselves, with very lagging communication or no communication. So how can you do that effectively? And as much information as I can train with and learn and memorize, you always have to have something that there with you to remind you to like a database that is always with you. That's what
Mhm.
kind of technologies allow for the transmission of this information to a human being to augment what they know. And augmentation is going to be is one of the programs that is being worked in NASA in order to go beyond the LEO, the low Earth orbit. So these are incredible projects, as well as many in robotics, materials and space
Mhm.
projects. There's tons in order to, live now on a surface on the moon. So it's very exciting time for exploration and human space exploration, indeed.
Thank you, Evelyn. Recently, we have seen a rise in private space companies launching what seems to be a new space race. Could you talk about commercialization of the space industry and the future of the market?
Well, as we're going to see very soon in a couple of weeks, a commercial company, SpaceX, is going to take American astronauts, NASA astronauts into space. Right
Mhm.
there that is the full demonstration of what commercialization in space is going to do in the next 5, 10 years. Um, I think that government and just NASA cannot do it alone. Partnering with commercial companies is going to be the key to continue innovation and to push the boundaries to really go beyond LEO, beyond low Earth orbit, which is what we have done with the space station for all this time. Eventually, I can see, obviously, in the next 5-10 years, the space station being completely commercialized, to the point that we're going to have visitors going there, commercial visitors. We might have a hotel. We might have so many things going on, research that can be done now by the public, by commercial entities, with commercial purposes. And so this is just exciting times for anybody that has the will and imagination to really create different endeavors, projects for space. So commercialization is going to happen at LEO, is happening going into the moon with the SpaceX and other companies that are actually being part now of Artemis through NASA. But eventually, this is going to be fantastic for companies being in power of.
Thank you. Countries and organizations both are speeding up their aerospace and satellite technology, hoping to expand their footprints. With so many players entering the field now, what institutions and establishments are there for regulation in space?
Well, this is a very important question, because I think that there isn't really an infrastructure for governing, space. I mean, there was a treaty signed in the 1960s. I think it was in 1967, where it governs the use of outer space, including the moon, including celestial bodies. But truly, it hasn't been anything specifically done in regard to just satellites, other than individual countries having their own regulation in terms of debris, instead of what materials, how many satellites, if it's gonna hit somebody else's satellites and things like that. So this part of the governing, especially as we are pushing commercialization of space and making it even more impactful and bigger towards the future, and more players coming in there, the need of this governance is going to have to be established, some structure in regulations, this is a very important part. And I know there are people, there are actually entities working on this at the moment. But this has to be probably well defined before we endeavor, because till now, who owns the space? Nobody. Mankind owns the space. So, what happened when we get back to the moon? Who owns it?
Right.
All these questions have to be definitely defined before we get there, and I'm sure they will.
I think there has been some confusion around the U.S. Space Force and what exactly it entails. Could you discuss, what the Space Force is, its responsibilities and purpose?
Well, this is fascinating. Obviously, many people ask that question, but the Space Force is actually a new branch of the armed forces. Mm-hmm. So we used to we have the Air Force as an armed force, and within the Air Force, we had what's called the Space Air Force Command. And that is different to what Space Force is. Space Force is going to be is a new branch, and it's basically the main responsibility of the Space Force will be to protect space assets that we have in the space, and also to, again, I'm going to use the word augmented, but it's truly is part of the responsibility to augment the power, if you will. Right, our forces, by looking now through the lens, through the eyes from the space, you can actually see better all your armed forces and help them. So it truly, for me, if I have a kind of another view looking at that, is if you will, that will be kind of having augmented glasses and a different view of a space. So, and being able to give more power to the other force. So I see this space force and their responsibility extremely critical in this time, especially as we just talked before about satellites and so many countries now being players in that space, to have our armed forces up to speed, technologically advanced, to actually be out there and protect what we're doing, when we're going to endeavor to do very soon, especially as we commercialize. Just as we talk about regulation, needs to be there too. So
Absolutely.
that's the, I think, the main responsibility as I understand it. So
And
that's
Evelyn, as we continue exploration, there have been questions of resource mining and how that will impact the sustainability of Earth as well as other planets. Could you expand on that?
well, that's another fascinating question that we can talk for a while. Well, I mean, I remember doing simulations to actually mine, what is it, asteroids.
Mhm.
So all this has been thought of for many years, has been simulated. The reason why, because we can find incredible technology, we can define, we can create, we can a new incredible technology for mining. We can, if we go to the moon, we can find different, minerals that are going to be magnesium. We can find calcium. We can find, most important, water. What happens when we found water now? We define, okay, we can find that at the poles of the moon. And what happened is that we can now refuel our rockets from the moon with the water. What happens if we mine that? I mean, can we live there? Then we can create materials. Then we can build there. So the fact of finding and mining in another planet means that we can sustainable live there to the point, right? And it's all by doing and created the technologies to generate and build all these pieces and parts that we need. So what we learned doing that in sustainability, sustaining ourselves, for example, on the moon, that means that we're going to have to recycle and reuse everything that we take over there, and take the less. So we're going to have to take less stuff over there, and we're going to have to reuse and recycle everything we do. And so by learning that and doing that at the moon, that's something that can be done on Earth. We're going to learn so much by just challenging ourselves and our engineering, our imagination, innovation into all these processes, making things more compact, efficiency. I mean, there's so many things that make that will allow us to enhance our sustainability, our living on Earth, that is incredible. So yes, I think that there is a lot of technologies that we can learn, that we can develop, that will be very beneficial for using it on Earth. So yes, I mean, mining will be a big part of all that, and how we mine.
Thank you, Evelyn. And lastly, before we move on to the audience Q&A part, what is the outlook on human colonization of other planets?
Well, to tell you, me personally, I do not see that in the foreseeable future, just because that takes, I don't see that. I don't think we have the technology to do that. We can settle. We're going to settle and create something on the moon, in the next probably 10 years. Colonizing, I think it takes a lot more. And that means that, you have to look at taking a lot more people there. So, eventually it's probably going to happen at some level, but in the foreseeable next probably 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I don't see any of that happening. But again, I mean, the problem is that, I mean, what you find when you go to the moon is the desert. So we love our Earth. So just ask that question: how, colonizing an area like that will uh, a set of people with a set of skills. So all that is there is a lot of challenges that we need to overcome in order to we can say colonizing the planet, but it's definitely in the mind and the thought of eventually one day do it. But I don't see that immediately in the immediate future, as we talk, within the next 10, 20 years. But it's definitely a fascinating concept, and many of our technologies of we build it right now, it can be imagined towards the future, which is what foresight is, and looking into the future is so important for us engineers, and creating that imagination of what could be. And it really helps us to solve many problems that we have today if we start looking a little bit beyond of what we have in front of us and the challenges just in front. So anyway, that's my personal opinion, but
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Let's move on to the Q&A portion of our program. To the audience, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. I will try to get to as many questions as time permits. First question, what are concerns in regards to global security as more countries expand their aerospace and satellite technology?
well, I mean, that's always, I think, is a concern. I think that's what the Space Force is being organized, because part of our cybersecurity connectivity is depending upon satellites. Our connectivity, if we decide to go to the moon and beyond, will be, very dependent on what's going on in the space, and how to defend it and how to protect it for everybody. Sake and all the allies is important. So yeah, I'm concerned about that, just like I've been concerned about cybersecurity on Earth. I'm moving towards the future, and we depend on that space in order to do our exploration with humans in the loop. So this is going to be a very important, very dedicated, where we will need a lot of very technologically minded workforce in the future. So very important.
And a question from Phoebe, what are the questions that we want to answer by going to Mars?
Oh, by going to Mars. Well, first, can you sustain such a long trip with the same people? Live with the same people for, can you go to a place and travel for, 6 months, not knowing that you can just turn back and come back? I mean, can you sustain mentally? I think a psychological part is, that's what people are going to learn the most. I mean, what medium maybe can we use to just be there? Can we just praise somebody? I mean, there's so many questions in that, so many things that we can learn, obviously, but just to get the rocket there, successful. Not, we have done the robot, send curiosity there, but what about, rockets with people, and how will that function? So there is a lot of things that we're going to learn going to Mars, towards Mars. But one is psychological, I think. We can do a lot of tests on Earth that you're on Earth. Mm-hmm. When you go beyond, when you go to the moon, it's still closer. You can still see the Earth. But as you go towards Mars, you don't see the Earth anymore, right? So, I mean, just ask those very simple questions, and the challenges are big. So there's a lot of things that we can learn, obviously, from that. But it's definitely going to be a challenge.
And a question from Pat, what is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on NASA's planning and work?
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly everybody what is doing NASA, but I can tell you that all the measurements and in terms of, people quarantine and taking precautions are being done, especially around astronauts that are going to be ready to fly. when astronauts are getting ready to do that, they are away from people. So I imagine now they're probably even away from families, immediate, in a constant base. So all that is basically taken care. I mean, being taken care of. But also, people trying to do meetings through video now. So, I mean, there is a lot of probably challenges that has been brought up, just like many other industries where now you have to virtually be there. At least in my area, where I used to work, actually, virtuality and doing this was kind of a way of being. So I'm very used to it. So, but for many people are not. So a lot of jobs have to be adjusted for that. Travel less. Many people through NASA travel a lot because a lot of visiting they have to do to different sites to oversee systems and things like that. That now may have to do a little more virtual of that. So there's probably a lot of changes that have been going on just to adjust, especially when you talk about the physicality. You have to see equipment and test it and check it out. But a lot of it was fun to me and great that during my time we created many tools to actually allow the astronauts to train themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They needed any special training that they can do on their own. So all of that is being augmented at this point, which is fantastic. Just something that we tested at some level and now is probably being used. So that's,
Thank you. And a question from Josh. What new international partnerships is NASA developing?
International partnerships. There is a lot that, NASA has been always in partnership with other countries, European agency. There's other international agencies that NASA has always worked in partnership in Australia, Japan. The International Space Station is international. It has always have international partners. So NASA has been doing that for many, many years. So it's the beauty of being in the space industry where I saw really true partnership happening in the sense that it's not only with our local in US, but also with the world.
Mm-hmm.
Endeavor like a space, and when you really talk about human in space, it's not, you don't do it in a silo. You don't do it alone. You have to really use all your partners, and especially international partners, and many of them are pretty advanced in space and exploration as well. So there's a lot of them.
Thank you. And a question from Michael. Do you see any possibility that NASA and the U.S. national labs can join forces to reverse global warming?
Definitely. And NASA has been, I think, helping to project the views and with all the satellite pictures and high resolution pictures that the astronauts are taking from the space station and beyond, even when they do a spacewalk in certain areas. All these pictures and data that they're obtaining when they're in the space station is definitely helping to look and put a more focus into the area of climate change and what's happening in certain regions of the world that are changing dramatically because of the impact on temperatures. And so, NASA definitely has always been involved to make sure that they have that data available for different organizations that are willing to take it beyond to study and research. So there is a lot of definitely information that is coming from NASA and directorate. So.
And a question from Ira. What specifically can universities and colleges do to ready graduates for the knowledge, skills, and application demands of this next phase of U.S. space exploration?
Well, universities have actually such an important role during this pandemic. Actually, it has propelled many universities to ask really hard questions. What can they do now to assess the students and make sure that they're ready for the future? What is coming? The future type of workforce. something that I hopefully will be talking soon about, the augmentation of the workforce. So universities have to be more agile. Universities and faculty have to be also mindful of keep relearning, retraining, incorporate into their modules assignments that are a little not as traditional, but looking into the industry and to see how they can incorporate. Examples could be how labs can be done virtually or partial labs. How can you assess the agility, the intelligence, the knowledge of these students? Are they learning? All these, there's so many measurements that can be done now virtually that university has to be involved with, supporting. And also the component of now the personalization, just like we're doing with the medical industry, we need to personalize education a little bit more. We need to understand a little more where the student is and taking them to empower them to learn from what they want to, or for what they want to grow their expertise into. That's where they're gonna be more impactful. So universities have such an incredible position at this time. Our university that I'm right now, the University of Clear Lake, we're doing so many incredible things, looking into the future to precisely work and provide that education for the future workforce.
Thank you. And I'll take two more questions here. The first from Brian. To elaborate on your comments on the new Space Force, what is your view on the likelihood of armed conflict taking place outside of the Earth's atmosphere?
If I see that happening,
Mm-hmm.
is that the question?
Yes.
Of course, anything can happen. Of course, it could happen. But again, I mean, the beauty of having a space force is that you can predict that, you can stop that. It's like if we think of many people thinking an asteroid can come and hit the Earth, that possibly we can deter that. Well, the same with armed forces and in the space. I mean, we can definitely, if we learn, if we're very agile, very smart, if we have the knowledge base there, so we can deter that for that happening. But it definitely can happen. I mean, eventually, and that's one of the reasons I think, in between many, I believe that we have to have a presence there to assess and protect those assets that are very meaningful and impactful. If we lose communication, imagine that, right?
Right. And the last question here from Connie. What are the top 2 or 3 problems NASA is working on that must be solved to travel to Mars?
Oh, 2, 3 problems. I think that communication, relay, do you work through that? How do you communicate with a delay? 20 seconds, 30 seconds, that's pretty. Materials, transportation, how we successfully get there with humans. I mean, there is many, many, many challenges still. And I think the technology is best if we go to the moon and we are all reusable, sustainable. We will learn a lot. We will learn probably all that we need to definitely prepare going to Mars.
Thank you, Evelyn. That will be the end of our Q&A session as well as our program. Evelyn, thank you again for your time and the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I enjoy talking to everybody, all the members, and I appreciate, for the hospitality and being, here with all of you. Thank you again.
Thank you. To our audience, thank you for attending C by C. Remember to support your local council. And for more information, check out cbycamplified.com. If you enjoyed our webinar today, subscribe to our YouTube channel to access more. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.